Hello everyone and welcome to another roster review. Today we're going to take a look at the infamous Demon Monster Mash army. If you haven't already, guys, please hit that subscribe button, notifications bell in the corner over there so you know each time we release one of these videos. And if you're enjoying this content and you would like more exclusive content, amazing discounts off our web store, or if you just love what we do and you'd like to support the channel, then please head over to glasshammergaming.co.uk and join the elite. Right, so we have got the Demon Monster Mash army. This is an army that I've been using on battle reports for quite a long time now, and it seems to be getting a lot of love every single time I use it on a battle report. You guys seem to really like it, and I've had loads of people message me going, what secondaries does it play? How does it play? What does it struggle against? And then people were like, oh, and what have you thought about how you would change the list if you were moving forwards? Like, if you're going to take it to an event, how would you change it? And I thought, you know what? These are all questions to be answered in a roster review. So why don't we make a roster review about the Demon Monster Mash? And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the Demon Monster Mash roster review. So first of all, stage number one, let's take a look at the list. So it's made up of 2 battalion detachments. One battalion detachment is pure Slaanesh, made up of only Slaanesh units. And that's because the locus for having a pure Slaanesh detachment, a locus is an ability that all characters in a detachment gain if every demon unit in that detachment owes its allegiance to the same god. So having a pure Slaanesh detachment means that we all gain the locus that having a pure Slaanesh detachment gains you, and all the characters in that detachment get it. And basically the locus for being a pure Slaanesh detachment allows the character and all units within 6 inches, or each character in that detachment and all units within 6 inches of them at the start of the charge phase, it allows all of those units to declare a charge even if they advance that turn. So essentially, if you place your characters well, that's basically an army-wide advance and charge. But it's for all of the Slaanesh units within 6 inches. So it wouldn't benefit like your Zinch units, your Khorne units, all of those kind of things. Other Slaanesh units, but it's a huge, huge ability. So that's the detachment we're going to talk about second. Let's talk about the interesting one first. So first of all, we have just a standard Chaos Demon detachment, and that's because it is a little bit mixed. There's not just one, there's not just an allegiance to one god in there. And that starts off with Big Chicken, also known as a Lord of Change, but we like to call him Big Chicken. So we've got Big Chicken over here, and he is the Warlord. Now, the reason for him being the Warlord is Be'lakor's Warlord trait is a bit meh. He doesn't have to be your Warlord, and he can't take a relic. But Big Chicken, ladies and gentlemen, if you make Big Chicken your Warlord, he can take an amazing Warlord trait. For 1 CP, you can give him a great Exalted trait, and he can have an awesome free relic. So why would you not? Right, so his Warlord trait is Incorporeal Form, which is -1 from the damage characteristic of any attack that targets him. So he reduces damage by 1. Then he's got the Impossible Road Relic, which gives him a 3+ invulnerable save. And he's got the Aura of Mutability, which gives him a 6+ Feel No Pain. But for every save he passes, every wound he ignores with the 6+ Feel No Pain, let's say not with the 3+ Invuln, with the 6+ Feel No Pain, he also regains a wound that he lost earlier on. In that detachment, obviously I'll explain more about this, guys, in the how it works section. I'm just talking about what's in the list in this bit. Then we've also got Be'lakor in that detachment, and he's got Penumbral Curse and Betraying Shades. And we've got Shalaxi Hellbane. How cool is her model? I love it. I really, really like her model. So yeah, we've got Shalaxi Hellbane in that detachment too, the Lord of Keepers of Secrets. And then we've got 1 unit of 10 Brimstone Horrors. They're just so cool. So cool. And then 2 units of 10 Demonettes. And then in our second detachment, which is the pure Slaanesh detachment, we have got 3 Keepers of Secrets. And again, just like Big Chicken, we have paid a CP for each one of them to have an exalted trait because they are so big, and every single one is worth 1 CP. Because you only pay 1 CP in your army list, and you get the ability for the whole game, basically. The whole game. So one of them has lightning fast reflexes. You always pick that one. So one of them has, quicksilver reflexes. You always pick that one. It gives that keeper a 4+ invulnerable save for the whole game instead of a 5+. And that's crucial. So you always take that on one of them. Then the second keeper has got Blessing of the Dark Prince. And you pretty much always take that because obviously you don't tailor. So you always take that in your list. And Blessing of the Dark Prince means that keeper, anytime your enemy makes a wound roll against that keeper with ranged attacks, they must subtract 1 from the wound roll. So she's -1 to be wounded, basically, from ranged attacks. And then you have the third keeper. Now, the third keeper I always roll randomly for, because for the way this list plays, survivability, or getting some survivability in there, is key. Now, these first two, one having a 4-up invulnerable and one being -1 to be wounded with ranged attacks, they are very, very durable. And I was like, but those are the 2 traits that make a keeper durable. So what do you do with the third one? You don't pick a trait. That's what you do. You roll, because when you roll, you get to roll 2d6. Now, a 2 and a 3, you're looking for one of those. When you're rolling 2 dice, you have a 33% chance of getting 1 out of the 2. So you just roll to try and hope that you get one of them. And that keeper also has the Forbidden Gem. So she gets 2 traits and the Forbidden Gem, which is amazing. She is very, very good and crucial to the way that the list works. So those are the 3 Keepers of Secrets. I give them all the whip because I really like having some shooting in there, and their shooting is very reliable. 6 shots, they get 6 shots, and it's assault, so they can advance and shoot it. It is strength 6 -2 damage. Bear in mind, they hit on 2s, re-rolling 1s if they're within 6 of Be'lakor, and then they wound on 2s or 3s against most infantry in the game, re-rolling 1s for being a Keeper of Secrets. So they have got a lot of shots, and they're very reliable, and they're -2 damage, so they've got a great stat line, and they really hurt when they hit. So I've given all of them the whips. And then in that detachment, you've also got 3 units of 10 Demonettes again, but 2 of the units have got an Instrument of Chaos because I had 20 points spare when I wrote the list. And that's it. Sorry, guys. Something's stuck in the back of my throat. Well, there you have it then, guys. That is the whole army list. Let's have a look at how it works. Right, so how it all works. Now, the Lord of Change. Not very many people see it this way. And a lot of how the list works is relying on him being targeted for certain things. Now, you got to use the Lord of Change in a way that your opponent has to go for him at some point in the game, because he is so tough. Now imagine, he's toughness 7. That's fairly hard to wound anyway. So he's toughness 7, but then he has a 3+ invulnerable save. And you've got to remember, everybody else in your army has a 4+ invulnerable save or a 5+ invulnerable save, which isn't great. When you're taking big monsters and they only have a 5+ invulnerable save, it can get very, very risky. Now, that's where he comes in. He's actually got a 3+ invulnerable save, meaning that when you shoot him with anti-tank weaponry, normally anti-tank weaponry doesn't have very many shots. They don't have volume of fire. They just have high quality, low number of shots. So if you get shot by them, he probably doesn't have very many saves to take. And then, because he's got that 3-up invulnerable, he bounces 2/3 of them most of the time. So only 1/3 of wounds caused actually go through, averagely. Then any damage that does go through is reduced by 1 because of his Warlord trait in corporeal form. So, yeah, so basically he's bouncing 2/3 of the attacks away anyway. Only 1/3 goes through. Then he reduces the damage of those 3rd attacks that go through. Then he rolls a dice for each, for the damage that's remaining. So, for example, say 3 shots went through, and all of them have a damage characteristic of 3. Let's say that. So 3 shots go through his invulnerable save. So that's 9 damage he'd take. But you reduce the damage of each attack by 1. So instead of 3, they'd all do 2 each. So instead of taking 9 damage, he only takes 6 damage. And then when he takes 6 damage, he gets to roll 6 dice. And for every 6, he ignores the damage. So he should roll 1 6 there. So 5 go through and 1 gets ignored. And then after losing those 5 wounds, if he's still alive, then the one that he rolled a 6 for, he regains that wound back as well. So he's only actually lost 4. Because that's what aura mutability does, is that you not only ignore the wound that you've rolled a 6 for, but you also regain a wound which you lost too. So he is very, very durable, to say the least. And, you know, I was saying, let's say 3 go through his invulnerable. You've got to remember, for 3 attacks to go through his invulnerable, most people would have had to cause 9 saves on him, cause him to take 9 saves. With a flat 3 damage weapon, there aren't very many things in the game that can make him take 9 saves at toughness 7 with a 3+ invulnerable save. But if something does, he should lose like 4 wounds, and he has 16. So yeah, he is very tough to take down. So you use him in an aggressive way because he is basically like a decoy. He's a bullet magnet, but you want that. You want people to go for him, basically. You don't want him to be flying around really not making an impact on the game. You want him to actually be able to cause an impact. And the best way for him to do that is by soaking fire while the rest of your army gets up the board. So I normally use him kind of out in the open. He's the one who starts out in the open, unless I can hide them all, which in some, in some terrain missions I can, but in most of the time I can hide like 4 of the 6 big demons. Then 2 have to be a bit more like, one can be like hidden at angles, so only a couple things can see him. But then Lord of Change just pretty much goes out there and he soaks up the firepower, and then he just goes all out aggression and goes straight out and destroys some stuff. Then in that attachment, you've also got Be'lakor. Now, the important thing to remember about Be'lakor is he owes allegiance to all 4 gods. He has the keywords for all 4 gods, meaning that he counts as a Slaanesh unit, a Tzeentch unit, a Khorne unit, and a Nurgle unit. So when the Lord of Change casts powers like Boon of Change, which I've got, then he can do that on any Tzeentch units. That's not just for himself. He can also do that on Be'lakor. And when you do that, and say he's done Gaze of Fate and then he casts Boon of Change, you can roll your result on the Boon of Change table, but then you can re-roll it. You can't re-roll it with the CP re-roll anymore, but you can re-roll it with your Gaze of Fate re-roll. And if you get the correct result, it's only 3 results, so you got 33% chance, but then when you're rolling again, you actually got a lot more chance. Now, when you do that on Be'lakor, if you get the toughness buff, the +1 toughness, he becomes toughness 8. And then he's very hard to deal with because your opponent is always -1 to hit him all the time, range attacks and close combat. And they're -1 to hit him, and they can never reroll the hit roll when targeting him, which is big too. And then he is -1 to be wounded with range attacks, same as the Lord of Change. So that's huge. He's about -1 to hit, cannot re-roll the hit roll, -1 to wound from range attacks, and then one of his powers targets a unit and makes them -1 to wound things in combat as well. So he is very, very tough, and he doesn't normally go down very easily. He has 16 wounds. He only has a 4-up invulnerable, but like we say, all of the debuffs that he knocks onto your opponent are very, very big and very important because a lot of armies do rely on rerolls these days. So he's like a must-take for me in a demon army. Well, mainly he's a must-take for me because he's such a cool model, but he is also very, very good. So that's what Be'lakor does. He goes around, he's tough, and you want him to get into your opponent's elite units. So my favourite thing to send him into is things like Thunderwolf Cavalry, Custody Bikes, basically like 4 wound elite stuff, 3 or 4 wound elite stuff, because the damage on his weapon is D3 +3, and it is -4 AP and D3 +3 damage. So -4 means someone with a 3-up save won't be getting a save. And even if units have a 2-up save, that gets reduced all the way to a 6-up save. And they're not allowed to take any invulnerables. So no invulnerables allowed, -4, meaning most things in the game won't get a save against this attack, and each one that goes through does D3 plus 3 damage. And he gives all demons within 6 inches reroll 1s to hit, including himself, which is great. And he's got 6 attacks. So he's got 6 attacks, rerolling 1s to hit, and on 2s, rerolling 1s. That's basically 6 hits. Then he is strength 12. So he's going to be winning most things in the game on 2s and 3s, meaning he's going to get 4 to 5 wounds. And against most, that's straight through. So that's like 4d3 plus 12 or 5d3 plus 15 damage. That really hurts. Let me tell you, that really, really hurts. So not only is he very durable, but he also hits like a brick in combat, which is what you would expect, you know, from Be'lakor, you know? So I think it's great because he kind of plays the way that it feels like he should play, if you know what I mean. So yeah, Be'lakor is great. Then you've got Shalaxi Hellbane. She's very good, and she's a character hunter. So she gets 6 attacks in combat. She is strength 12 with those 6 attacks. That's what differs her from a normal keeper to her. She's strength 12, -3, and it's d6 damage. But anytime you roll a 6 to wound against a character unit, it's flat 6 damage, which is amazing. Then she gets 4 snapping claw attacks. And those are strength 6, -3, flat 3 damage. So there's a lot of attacks, 10 attacks there, and she is still a keeper of secrets, meaning that she re-rolls 1s to wound. Very, very big. If she's within 6 of Be'lakor, she can re-roll 1s to hit, and then just for being a keeper of secrets, she can re-roll 1s to wound. So she is great. And then also, all keepers are -1 to be hit in close combat with melee attacks, -1 to be hit. But because she's like the queen of the keepers, she's also -1 to be wounded with melee attacks as well. So if you try and hit her in combat, you're -1 to hit her and -1 to wound her. And then Slaanesh have a stratagem called the Aura of Acquiescence. So any Slaanesh unit can use it at the start of the fight phase. And then all enemy units within 3 inches of that Slaanesh unit in the fight phase reduce their attacks characteristic by 1 to a minimum of 1, but reduced by 1. So imagine if you're a combat unit going in there to kill her, and she's like, first of all, you all lose an attack, then you're all -1 to hit me, and you're all -1 to wound me. Bonkers. Then we move on to the normal keepers of secrets. So we've got 3 keepers of secrets, and they work very much in the same way as Shalaxi. You know, their combat is insane, but their 6 attacks they get. So she'll actually get 6 that are strength 12 -3 d6 damage. Now theirs I actually prefer because it's more reliable. I don't like Shalaxi being d6. She should probably be d3 plus 3 just so she's reliable. Now normal keeper of secrets, their 6 attacks are made with a Wit Stealer sword, meaning that they are all strength 8 -3 flat 3 damage, which is very, very good, especially in the meta right now. And then they also get the 4 snapping claw attacks at, again, strength 6 -3 damage. So you've got 4 attacks of strength 6, which are -3 damage, and 6 attacks of strength 8 that are -3 damage. It's a lot of attacks, and again, they're re-rolling, they're hitting on 2s, and then they're wounding on whatever they wound on, re-rolling 1s. So that, you know, like when you add up how many attacks they're getting, essentially, they do a lot of damage, like a lot of damage. And one of the brilliant things about them is the list works on pressure. So, for example, the Lord of Change moves 12 inches and just advances forward, and he flies, so he goes over ruins. And Be'lakor does the exact same thing. So those two fly over ruins and take like the more terrain-filled route kind of thing. And then the 3 keepers and Shalaxi just advance up the board, and they move 14 inches standard. So they're moving 14 inches plus a d6. So averagely, keepers are moving 17 to 18 inches. On average rolls, like 3s and 4s, they don't even need the 5s and 6s. So they're moving 17 to 18 inches. And then, you know, like the 3 keepers of secrets, they got the locust because you're in a pure Slaanesh detachment. So they can advance and charge. And if Shalaxi and Be'lakor are within 6 inches of any one of the 3 keepers, which most of the time they are, then they can advance and charge. And that's what makes Be'lakor so dangerous, is he could be like 26 inches away from your opponent, but then he moves 12 inches and advances, so that could be like 17, 18 inches. Straight over ruins in a direct straight line, and then he's got like a 7-inch charge to make, and he's gone 26 inches or something, which is pretty damn good. So yeah, that's what I really like about Be'lakor, is the fact that he can ignore terrain when he moves in the movement phase by flying over it. And all he's got to do is end within 6 of a keeper and he's in there. And that's the thing, is keepers move so quick, they can keep up with him, because if he rolls like a 4 on his advance, he's moving 16. If they roll a 4, they're moving 18. So they're moving 2 inches quicker than him. So even though they've got to go around terrain, they can normally go around and still make it to within 6 inches of him for him to still be able to charge, which is that's crucial. That's what makes him such a big threat. So you need that kind of mechanic to get in there. Very powerful. So that's what the keepers do, basically. They put huge amounts of pressure on. So the Lord of Change and Be'lakor are right in their faces. Shalaxi and all 3 keepers are right in their faces. They don't have very many turns to get rid of those things, because you're just going to hit them hard. So the secondaries as well, this list performs very well, because what you see is the 6 big monsters. That's what everybody goes for, because you have to. And that's the thing, is I don't think any army will win a game against these guys if they just ignore the big demons and go for the little ones. That's not going to work. People have to go for your greater demons, because if they get into your opponent's lines, they will do too much damage. So you don't want them to get in. So people will be focusing on them. And that's a great thing, because you have 5 units of 10 demonettes, 50 demonettes, 5 units of 10, and a unit of 10 brimstone horrors. Now, the unit of 10 brimstone horrors, without fail, will always sit on your back objective. They sit on my back objective all the time. They never do anything else. So they always sit on your home field objective, getting you 5 points a turn for holding an objective. And, they're on an objective. They're in a quarter. They do, they're contributing in quite a lot of ways by just sitting there. And they're only a 50-point unit. So it's not like losing hundreds of points by leaving an expensive unit at the back. Then the 5 units of 10 demonettes, they just, again, they stay disengaged from your opponent, far away, and they just play the flanks. They play the flanks. So say you're deployed kind of like in a corner. So this is the board, 4 corners. So you're in this corner. You're on an objective with your brimstones, and then you're playing out like this with your demonettes, that way and that way. And the reason for that is you pretty much always want to go with engage on all fronts. This list can do engage on all fronts insanely well, because the keepers and Be'lakor and Lord of Change are just so quick. And like we said, you want to put pressure on your opponent with those 6 big monsters. So they will be in your opponent's face. So they'll be in like 2 of the quarters, but in the pushing quarters, and then you'll have the brimstones and the demonettes in your back quarters easily, and then you'll be using a demonette to push forward for other quarters later on in the game as well, maybe when a couple of keepers go down. So you can reliably get like 10 or more points on engage on all fronts in pretty much every game. So you always go with that. Then the next one, you either go for retrieve Octarius data or raise the banners. This list is a great at raising banners, because it raises banners like in your half of the board, and then puts insane pressure on your opponent. And they cannot concentrate on taking your banners down when you've got like obsec brimstones and obsec demonettes on those objectives. They can't focus on taking those down when you've got 6 big monsters running at them. So that's the thing that this list relies on, is that people have got to deal with the greater demons first. And that's a huge advantage of playing this style of list. So yeah, so basically you're retrieving data or raising banners in every mission, and then you're engaging on all fronts in basically every mission. Gives you 2 great secondaries. You might think, well, you can't just play the game off 2 secondaries. You need a 3rd one. And that is another reason the list is so good, because all 6 of your monsters are characters and psychers. So they can all do warp ritual, which means one of them just needs to get within 6 inches of the center of the board and cast warp ritual, and you get 3 points the first time you do that. Then if you do that for a second turn with anyone, it doesn't have to be the same one, with anyone, you get another 4 points. That takes you up to 7. And then if you do it in a 3rd turn, you get another 5 points. That takes you up to 12. And the most powerful thing about that secondary is you don't have to do it every turn like the rest of the secondaries you've got to play for. You just have to do it in 3 different turns. So you could do it for example, turn 1, if you don't have many things to go for. And then in turns 2 and 3, if you've got to fight, then go and fight. And then you can finish it in turns 4 and 5. So you can get it turn 1 and then turn 4, 5. Or you could just stack it up very early, turns 1, 2, 3, and then you can go off and do whatever you want turns 4 and 5. So it's very flexible. That's what I like about it, is it's a flexible secondary, and it's a reliable one for this army. When you've got 6 character psychers, that becomes a reliable psychic, a reliable secondary to get off and get your points for. So that should be, in most cases, 12 points. Now, the one power I want to talk about just before we move on is Hysterical Frenzy. It's an amazing power. People, if you use Slaanesh, make sure you include Hysterical Frenzy. And if you play against Slaanesh, make sure you watch out for Hysterical Frenzy. So you cast it on an 8 in the psychic phase, and then you choose a Slaanesh unit within 18 inches of the caster. That's far, man. Like, any keeper can move 14 inches and advance and then cast within 18 pretty much anywhere on the board. That's a very long distance. So, yeah, you cast Hysterical Frenzy, you pick a Slaanesh unit within 18 inches, most likely under the Keeper of Secrets, and they can fight in the psychic phase as though it was the fight phase. So you get to make basically 10 extra attacks, all at -3 flat 3 damage, and that can bail you out of so many situations. I've had it before when I've been charged by like a 5-man Vanguard veteran unit, and like in their turn, and then they've like bracketed me, so I only get 5 big attacks and 3 small attacks, and I've used that and I've killed 3 or 4 Vanguard veterans, and then I'm stuck in there because of the last one, and you can't fall back and charge. And then you go, right, well, I cast Hysterical Frenzy, and your opponent is like, yes, amazing, I've locked that keeper in combat, now that keeper can't do anything. And then all of a sudden, you cast Hysterical Frenzy in the psychic phase, she picks that unit up, like kills them in the psychic phase, then she can use her whip at another unit, another 6 attacks, a strength 6 -2 damage, and then she's allowed to charge something else because she's no longer in combat. So, yeah, that is an amazing spell, and probably the biggest tool in this army if people forget that you have it. So, yeah, that's the way that the list works, how it plays, how you should use it, what secondaries you should take. That's basically all of how it works. And what I like about it, it's not very complicated. There are a couple of very important things to remember, and that's it. Now, let's have a look how we're going to tackle it. Right, so how are we tackling this? Now, the thing is, it's not the strongest army in the game. Not by a long shot, but it's very good. I like it because it skews a fair amount into the monsters, but that can also be its downfall. So the first thing you've got to kind of consider is it gives away a few secondaries very easily. So if your opponent's got no psychers, it gives away a Bore the Witch. You've got 6 psychers and they're all characters. So if your opponent kills 5 of them, they get 15 points on a Bore the Witch. That's not great for you. But then also Assassinate as well. All 6 of these monsters are also characters. So if your opponent knows they can reliably kill, say, 4 monsters from your army, which isn't bonkers, that happens quite a lot of the games that I play with them. So if your opponent knows they can kill like 4, they could take Assassinate and a Bore the Witch, and that'll be 12 points on Assassinate and 12 points on a Bore the Witch. And then their army only really has to do 1 secondary. So guys, if you're going into this, it's not one of those, and that's a brilliant thing for if you're playing against this. It's not one of those where you have to go into the game with 3 secondaries your army can do reliably without your opponent giving 1. You just need to be able to do 1 secondary reliably, which pretty much any army in the game can do. And then this gives away 2 others. So actually, it's not that hard to play against because it helps you have good secondaries against it as you're going through the entire thing. So that's quite big. It's something that goes against this list, basically. Then actually tackling it. Now, high volume of fire is what this list hates. It can easily, the brimstones and the demonettes just fall over if you go after them with anything, because they are toughness 3. Brimstones have a 6 up invulnerable save, and the demonettes have a 5 up invulnerable save. So they are not very survivable at all. A stiff breeze will kill these units. But the demons, the big demons, is where it's at. Now, the Lord of Change is hard to kill. Yes, the Lord of Change is hard to kill. And so is Be'lakor. Be'lakor is tough to kill too. But the 3 keepers Not that tough to kill. One has got the 4-up invulnerable, of course, but it's T7 with a 4-up save. That is it. And it's got 16 wounds. So T7 is a bit awkward to wound. Yes, it's a high toughness. But if you've got anti-tank weaponry, these are the things you should be going for. Because the keepers, like anti-tank weaponry, most anti-tank weaponry in the game is strength 8 or 9. So you will be wounding this keeper on 3s. And with a 4-up invulnerable, half of everything you send its way is going through. So, you know, if you make this keeper take 4 saves with, say, Dark Lances, then it will save 2 most likely, but 2 will go through. So that's D3 plus 3 and D3 plus 3. And that's an average of 10 damage. Keeper's got 16 wounds. It's 2/3 dead because it took 4 Dark Lance shots. So... and that can really hurt. They can start falling down very quickly. And the thing is, you know, we talked about how many attacks they've got and how much damage those attacks do. When you start losing keepers, you lose a lot of damage output every time you lose a keeper. And so that one's got a 4-up invulnerable. The other one, the one with the Blessing as Dark Prince, that one's only got a 5-up invulnerable, but it's -1 to be wounded. So anti-tank weaponry there would most likely be wounding it on 4s. So that can be a little bit tough to wound, but then 2/3 of everything go through because it only has a 5-up invulnerable. They're not very survivable against the right things. If you shoot the right keeper with the right things, then you can do a lot. Now, for example, you don't want to go for the one that's -1 to be wounded with ranged attacks with anything that's strength 6 or less, basically, because you normally wound it on 5s. Now you'll be wounding it on 6s. So you don't really want to do that. You want to go for a different keeper with that. And then anti-tank weaponry, that's where you can maybe go for it, because most anti-tank weaponry, like we said, is strength 8 or 9, normally wounding it on 3s, so it means you'll be wounding it on 4s, which is a lot better. So that's the kind of thing you want to do. Then the other thing is combat. Now, that's like a little bit of a trap. So combat seems like it's a great way to deal with these monsters, because you're like, well, in combat, you don't get the -1 to be wounded. So one's got a 4-up invulnerable, and one's got nothing, essentially. One's just got a 5-up invulnerable. And then, you know, the third one's rolled randomly. So I can get them in combat with my good combat units. But then that's the thing, man. That's where you have the -1 to hit. All keepers are just -1 to hit in combat with range with combat melee attacks. So yeah, you're -1 to hit them if you go in like that. But then also remember the Aura of Acquiescence stratagem that we talked about earlier? It's 1 CP and it reduces the attacks characteristic of all enemy units within 3, not just one. All enemy units within 3 reduce their attacks characteristic by 1. Very, very big. So when you lose an attack and then you're -1 to hit, it can be very hard to take them down again. It might go, you might not have considered it. And also, people tend to multi-charge this. That's a thing for how to play it. Don't be multi-charging unless you can make things fight last and stuff like that, because if you charge 2 keepers, now Slaanesh units have the always fight first rule, basically. So if you charge 2 keepers, you'll fight against one of them and then they will get to interrupt for free, essentially. You know the stratagem that lets you interrupt, counter-offensive? They basically get a free version of that, because what happens is when 2 units have the always fight first ability, then you alternate, starting with the person who's charged, basically. But charging counts fight first ability. So if you charge with 2 units, they both get always fights first. And I have 2 keepers which have always fights first. So you would get to choose the first one when you charge, but then I would get to choose a keeper next. So if we have 2 combats here like this is you and this is you, and then these are my 2 keepers. So you've charged here. So you fight over here. Then what I would do is I would fight with this keeper over here to kill this unit that you came in with, or damage it significantly to the point where it doesn't really do much to me. So that, because this keeper's going to get to fight at the end anyway. So if you go into that keeper, then I will fight here and kill your squad, and then I'll fight here. So essentially you've gone in with 2 units, but I've come out better off. So that's something, is don't fall for that. And the next thing is mortal wounds. Like we said, you know, they can be pretty tough because they've got 4-up invulnerables. Every single model has got an invulnerable, and then they're T7, all of them. So they can be fairly hard to kill, especially when they're doing so much damage to you. But mortal wounds is something that this does not like. Mortal wounds with psychic powers are fairly hard to do because of the amount of denies that you've got in this army. But other ways of mortal wounds, like Wrath of Mars and things like that, those are actually very useful against this. Like every wound roll of a 6 does a mortal wound. So if you shoot like a unit of 40 rangers, say, and a keeper, you... Like rangers, for example, they hit on 3s rolling 1s. They should get like... I want to say 28 hits, 27 hits. So they say they get 27 hits on a keeper. From those 27 hits, they should, when they roll to wound, they should get 9 wounds. Now, those 9 wounds, half of them should be 6s. So you'll maybe take 9 5-up invulnerables, or 9 4-up invulnerables, say 5 invulnerables. So 6 go through, but then you've also rolled 5 6s. So that's 5 more wounds. So just a unit of 20 rangers on their own, which is a 200-point unit, they'll do like 9 wounds to a keeper of secret. No, sorry, 11 that was. 5 mortals and 6 go through. About 11 mortal wounds. That's a lot, man. The keeper's got 5 wounds left at that point. So mortal wounds, people, hates mortal wounds. I would say fast-moving obsec, but fast-moving obsec doesn't really help you much against this. If you try and steal an objective off a keeper, normally their base is so big that they're over the center of the objective. So if you try and put an obsec model on an objective and pinch it off a keeper, they will just heroically intervene and wipe out that unit because they are very good at wiping out those fast-moving obsec units that can steal objectives. So that is probably not a great way of doing it. So like we said, mortal wounds, volume of fire, and then also like resilient units that can hit hard in combat. Things like Deathwing Knights that can only be wounded on 4. Something that bypasses the fact that they're strength 6 and strength 8. Something that they've got to wound on 4s or higher and then has a decent save like an invulnerable. Things like Deathwing Knights, Thousand Sun Terminators, Death Shroud Terminators, basically Terminators. Those are the kind of things that you can send into these. Things like Talos, that have got -1 damage on them with Artists of Flesh. Those are things you want to send in there. So survivable things that are good in combat, mortal wounds, and volume of fire. Those are the 3 big things. And then remember that it gives away the secondaries when you're choosing, and make sure you choose the correct secondaries. So that is how we can tackle this army. Let's have a look at any modifications we can make. So modifications. As always, I wouldn't change very many things about the list because I think that it functions in a great way. And also, if you take too much away, you're just changing the list basically completely. Now, I quite like the 1 unit of 10 brimstones. People say to take it out because they don't do much. I agree they don't do much, but it's a cheap unit that sits at the back of the board, and you don't really want to be keeping good units back like that. The 2 instruments, now they're not needed. You can drop the 2 instruments. And if you drop the 2 instruments and 1 demonette unit, you can split the detachments up a little bit. So basically at the moment you've got 2 battalions. And that's great because it's saving you ATP. But it's ATP. You can go from having 2 battalions to having 1 battalion that's free, because your Warlord's still in there, still with Lord of Change, Shalaxi, and Be'lakor. But then what you can do with the 3 keepers is put them into 2 patrols instead of a battalion. So you can have 2 keepers with 10 demonettes and 1 keeper with 10 demonettes in the 2 patrols. And then basically, instead of having 30 demonettes there, you've only got 20. So that lets you drop 10 demonettes. Now, if you drop 10 demonettes and the 2 instruments, then you're saving 90 points. And you can use those 90 points to buy 2 units of 5 Furies. I would do that 100% because that gives you 2 units then that can move 12 inches, 2 infantry units that can move 12 inches and fly, and they can do actions for you like retrieve data, raise banners, all of that kind of stuff. So that's one change that I would definitely make. You're basically paying a CP because of the battalion turning to 2 patrols. So instead of costing you 3, it's costing you 4. So yeah, I would definitely do that. I would cost myself 1 CP, but be able to have 2 very fast-moving infantry units that can do banners and stuff like that for me. Now, the only other change, which I have been looking at, and I've got the model being painted on the way, and I just want to test it out to see if it works better than this or not. Now, the weak link in the list is Shalaxi. Now, I hate that because her model's so cool. She is a wicked, very, very cool model. But yeah, she is the weak link because she is the easiest to kill. Now, you know, the other keepers, one's got 4-up invern, one's one to wound range attacks, one's got random traits. Quite a few of the time it rolls the 4-up invern or the -1 to be wounded. and then other things, and has the gem. But then Shalaxi just, in combat, she's harder to kill than the others. But with ranged attacks, which is what your opponent's going to chuck at you first, she's the most susceptible. Toughness 7, 5 up invulnerable. No other buffs. That's it. That's all she has. So she can go down very quickly, and she's 240 points. She's quite a lot of points. So I've been looking at switching her out for Celeste. So we are still taking another Slaanesh monster in her place. But the interesting thing is, so you might think, oh, well, Celeste's easier to kill because Celeste's only got 9 wounds and Shalaxi's got 16. But that's where the magic comes in. Shalaxi's got 16, so she gets shot from across the board. Celeste has 9 and still is a character. So cannot be targeted unless she's the closest model because of Lookout Sir. So the other monsters can protect her with Lookout Sir, and also Demonettes and Brimstones can protect her with Lookout Sir. So I think Celeste might be a better choice because it gets rid of your weakest character, the one that's easiest to kill. So they've only got 5 bigger, harder targets to kill that they can go for. And then Celeste is still very, very quick, gets in and can get through smaller gaps because she's on a smaller base, and she hits pretty much just as hard because Shalaxi is unreliable with that spear. So those are basically the changes I would make. I would put some Furies in there, and I would put Celeste in and try it out and see how that goes. So that's basically it with the Demon Monster Mash, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned a lot because, man, I enjoy playing this army, and that's the thing is it's not very complicated. And what I like about it not being very complicated is you've only got a couple of things to remember, meaning you can really concentrate on the things you're doing in the game rather than the stats of your army and what you can do, because you should know what you can do after playing a couple of games with this. And then you go, right, now I know my army very well, so I can concentrate on my opponent and what their army does. So you can, like, you can ask more questions. You can take on a lot more information about their army because you know yours very well, because there's not too much to remember. So that's one of the things I love about this. You can play it to a very high level after just a few games. So yeah, guys, take it for a spin. And take my word on it, it's very, very fun to play. And also, it kicks some serious ass too. Like I say, guys, if you've watched to the end and you've enjoyed the video, please hit the subscribe button, notifications bell in the corner over there, so you know each time we release one of these videos. And if you, like I say, if you enjoyed the content and you'd like more exclusive content, including an extra battle report purely for elite members starting in the new year, and then also if you'd like great discounts off our web store, or if you like what we do and you'd just like to support the channel, then please head over to glasshammergaming.co.uk and join the elite. There you have it, guys. Get your demons out, get them on the table and kick some butt with them. And I'll be back next week with another roster review. Until then, everyone, stay safe and I'll see you later. Bye.